Turn back to Daniel chapter 9. And this is what verse 27 is about. The 70th week, the final week of this prophecy. If you remember verse 24, again, just as a little recap, tells us this prophecy is about 70 weeks or 490 years. And in that 490 years, God will achieve 6 objectives in verse 24. We looked at this last week. To finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy or the Holy of Holies of the kingdom age temple. Again, we talked about that last week. Then in verse 25 tells us about the first 69 weeks of the 70 weeks. And remember in verse 25, it was broken down in 7 weeks and 62 weeks for a total of 69 weeks or 483 years. Again, you can listen to the message from last week. Then verse 26 tells us about the gap between the 69th week and the 70th week. And then verse 27 tells us about the 70th week or the final 7 years of this plan for Israel. Now, we are currently living in the time between the 69th week and the 70th week. We're in between those 2 weeks. And let me just say, too, it's not unheard of for prophecies in the Bible to have a gap of time in their fulfillment. I'll give you a few examples. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. You know that verse from your Christmas cards. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. But then the rest of the verse says, and the government will be upon his shoulder. It's talking about the birth of Jesus Christ. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, God giving his son, child born to Mary, and the government will be upon his shoulder. That's going to happen at a second coming. So there's a gap there between his birth and the government's on his shoulder. Micah 5:2, but you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel. Jesus is born in Bethlehem in fulfillment of Micah 5:2, but he's not the ruler of Israel yet. That's going to be fulfilled at his second coming, so there's a gap of time there. My favorite example is found in Isaiah chapter 61, verses 1 and 2. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God. So verse 2 says that to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, that's the first coming of Jesus Christ, and the day of vengeance of our God, that's the second coming of Jesus Christ. And if you remember the story, this is why I love this passage so much. Luke chapter 4, Jesus is in the synagogue in Nazareth where he grew up. He stands up to read. They hand him the scroll of Isaiah. He opens up to Isaiah 61. He reads these 2 verses. When he gets to verse 2, he reads where it says, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. And it says in Luke 4 that he shut the scroll. He stopped at the comma. He didn't finish the whole sentence. Why not? Because the second half of the sentence has to do with his second coming, the day of vengeance of our God. So again, there are prophecies that have a gap of time, like this prophecy in Daniel. There's a gap of time between the 69th week and the 70th week, and that gap of time between the 69th and the 70th week, that's the church age. That's the church age, or the age of grace. And that's the time that we're living in right now. And the church age will end before the 70th week begins. The 70th week, well, really all 70 weeks, the 70 weeks are not about the church, right? They're about Israel and Jerusalem. It's not about the Gentile church. The church was not present for the first 69 weeks. The church will not be here for the final week or the 70th week. The church age will end before the 70th week begins, and the church age will end when Jesus takes his church to heaven. and what is known as the rapture of the church. The purpose of the rapture is to end the church age. The purpose of the rapture is to end the church age and to deliver the church from the wrath that is to come in that 70th week, that final 7 years. So Jesus will take his church to heaven before the 70th week begins. Right? Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come again, receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. So the rapture is when Jesus comes for his bride, for the church. We're caught up to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall ever be with the Lord. And it takes place before the 70th week.